Digital Agriculture Learning Series. I'm Parmesh Shah, the Global Lead for Data-Driven and Digital Agriculture at the World Bank. And in this series, we host innovators, thought leaders, startup founders, CEOs, public sector transformation, digital transformation leaders on the agriculture and food space. This space has become very, very active, particularly during the COVID period. I think the kind of unprecedented response we are seeing from governments and all the stakeholders during COVID period when supply chain disruptions happened and lots of people started rethinking whether we should reboot our agriculture and food systems in future. And so the agriculture and food global practice is also now trying to see if we can integrate data-driven and digital approaches into all the operations which we do, so that it becomes integrated into the new kinds of public and private investments which come in. Of particular concern is that the climate change is a very big issue right now, and also the attention on that is very high, as you can see from our annual meetings and other investments which we are doing. We are now looking at all our projects, looking at almost 50% of the investments are looking at climate mitigation and adaptation in the World Bank portfolio. In fact, even more. And Bill, our global lead, is today as a discussant, and he will tell you a little bit about what's happening in this space in agriculture and food as well. I have great pleasure today in having Acorn lead this conversation today. And it's good to see a full team of Acorn here. And Acorn, I think all of you have now seen from the announcement that, Acorn is a kind of emerging as a global innovator in this space. And those of you who don't know, I think they will talk about it. It's Agroforestry Carbon Removal Units for organic restoration of nature. And I won't talk, and it's about how do smallholder farmers access the international voluntary carbon market. And we are very interested in this approach because it works exclusively.
Unable to hear any voice.
What happened? Is everyone having the same problem, or only one person is having that problem?
We can hear you, Kamesh.
Can any one of the participants confirm they can hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Kamesh.
Just I will do randomly. Brigu, can you hear us?
All good.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can, Parmesh.
Gentlemen, the problem is at your end. We cannot solve your problem because we are not that competent to give you technical assistance at your doorstep. So we will go ahead, and I'm sorry, you please resolve the problem at your end. So coming back, I think Acorn is also interestingly using satellite monitoring technologies, remote sensing, and all. And Mila is going to talk about it. It's very innovative, using satellite imagery and a measurement methodology, which allows us, which has been the critical constraint for scaling up this. So we are very interested in that. So as we go today, all the proceedings are will be available to everyone on the Digital Agriculture website, as well as they will be available on the Open Learning Campus website, which is at the bottom of that and bottom of the announcement there. We'll request you to also mute your mics so that there is no background noise. Please put your questions in the chat box, and we will harvest all your questions so that we have a good Q&A session at that. We will cluster them, and we will see if speakers and discussants are able to do things, are able to answer your questions there. So we will introduce speakers and discussants as we go, and I'll not invest all of them in the beginning. We will go one by one. And as far as my order, I think we have, Martine Jensen, Head of Partnerships at Acorn, who will kick us off. And she has a lot of experience in Rabo as program manager, worked with farmer organizations, based organizations, and senior innovation manager on data and technology. Go ahead, Martin. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Parmesh.
Thanks for, yeah, go ahead.
I'll give it a start, and then I will give it over to Martina afterwards. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today we would like to introduce you Acorn. Acorn is an initiative by Rabobank. Rabobank is a global food and agri bank which is headquartered in the Netherlands. And like Parmesh already mentioned, Acorn is an abbreviation, which you can see on the slide as well. Because Acorn has so many dimensions, we are also with a complete team here for you today. So with me is Martina, who will elaborate on the partnerships and the added value that we create for farmers and for local partners. Eline, that will elaborate on our framework and methodology. Mila, as mentioned before, on satellite imagery, remote sensing, and Emma on the carbon markets. Perhaps first share with you why we as Rabobank started this initiative. Rabobank, it's a cooperative bank. It's founded by Dutch farmers, and its mission is to grow a better world together. And that's where Acorn is all about. Acorn always works together with farmers, with local partners that support the farmers in the rollout of agroforestry practices in developing countries, and connects those with corporates that want to compensate their unavoidable carbon emissions. As such, we have a very big ambition to challenge combat climate change, but also very important, secure food security. Those partnerships are crucial, and we want to do this together with our clients. And meanwhile, we are also building new capabilities for the bank. So what do we want to solve with Acorn? And I think there's a very good alignment with the World Bank, as also the World Bank aims to reduce the poverty of the poorest and increase the incomes of those that are in most poverty in the various countries worldwide. We want to improve the livelihoods of the smallholder farmers. And we want to do this by supporting those farmers that they stop planting trees. It can be coffee farmers planting shadow trees. It can be subsistence farmers that start planting mangoes and avocados. But this is also having a positive side on a regional and global level. It's combating climate change. We see more and more evidence every day. It's combating land degradation, and it's also, which is also a very hot topic these days, supporting food security on a regional level. We believe with this initiative, we can also support those that are hit hardest by climate change. With declining yields, with the impacts of droughts, we believe those farmers need the support to become more resilient to climate change. And the carbon emissions that have been mainly emitted in the global north have the severe consequences in the global south. And by supporting those farmers in this transition, we can also unlock a capital flow to the global south to support those initiatives. It's kind of climate equity that we want to follow in this way. And these capital flows can have significant, get significant in volume. And as such, also are a way of climate finance, green finance, that is so much needed in those regions. We are utilizing the two universal concepts of money and carbon. So that's why we can also exploit the difference. So for a farmer in Africa to sequester the carbon, the monetary benefits are relatively higher than for a Western farmer. And that's what we benefit from in this case. There are multiple benefits to the implementation of agroforestry for smallholder farmers. As I mentioned, some on a global level, some on an individual level, some to the local partners that will elaborate upon later. Just to highlight a few, having a solid contribution to number one, to end poverty, to improve the food production, so also to number two, zero hunger, and also biodiversity, for instance, just to highlight a few. Number 15, live on land. Giving you a more like methodological overview of how Acorn works. On the one hand, we have the farmers. They are always supported by local partners. One of those partners is Joël. He will be present later today. Representing Solidaridad. And those farmers, they plant the trees. We collect the farmer data, the field polygons of those farmers. And if we have the field polygons, we can measure the biomass, which will be elaborated upon later by Mila. We generate the carbon removal units, and those carbon removal units are sold by corporates that, what I mentioned before, want to reduce the carbon footprint, but in their quest to become carbon neutral, to compensate their unavoidables. And examples of first clients that we served are, for instance, Microsoft and Standard Chartered. Unique in this case is that 90% flows back to the local partner and 80% flows back to the farmer. And in that sense, the transaction costs are really lowered. And it's also that we therefore aim to deliver a solution that works on scale. So what are we delivering? We connect carbon emitters on the one hand with local partners and farmers on the other hand. We leverage the latest technology to make robust and conservative calculations on the delta and biomass. And we want to do this in all transparency and with all quality. So when a carbon removal unit is being created by being bought by a corporate, this corporate always can see when, where, and by whom the carbon removal is being created. We have an ambition to do this at scale. Before 2030, we want to serve more than 50 million farmers in multiple countries across the globe. That means that more than 4 billion trees will be planted. And annually, this can sequester 150 megatons of CO2 per annum. That equals 5 times the current emissions of Microsoft, plus 500 times the equal emissions of Rabobank. So it's not the solution, but it's a great way to improve the livelihoods of those smallholder farmers. Over to you, Martina.
Thanks, Jelmer. Yeah, and in order to reach that ambition and that scale that we envision, smallholders and the local partners that we want to work with are obviously critical. So making sure that we have a proposition that makes sense for both the farmers and the local partners is of high importance to keep the farmers and the local partners engaged, but also to create a positive business case that allows for scaling and possibly access to finance. So we look at working with farmers with a maximum of 10 hectares of cultivated land and hope to stimulate more farmers to make the transition to agroforestry. And why do we think that's so important? That's for the benefits of agroforestry as listed on this slide. So improving the quality of the soil, the nutrients, both the diversity and the quality of those nutrients, and ensuring that farmers will become more climate resilient and weather resilient. And that we feel is very important, but we very much believe that the carbon income can help make them transition more financially sustainable. Hence the reason why we want to try to link those farmers to the voluntary carbon market. If you can go to the next slide, Jelmer. We've looked at a lot of business cases. Here we take the example of maize farmers making the transition to an agroforestry-based system, adding trees such as the Fiduria tree. What you see here is that the business case, as opposed to the traditional farming case, illustrates additional income, and that's a combination of the carbon removal unit or the carbon credit income, as well as in this case additional income from food that is being harvested. What is not included here, but obviously provides additional benefits, is the diversity in diets, the improved soil health, and the climate resilience. But what you also see is that there might in certain cases be an upfront cost required. And if that is the case, we're looking to see if we can support in ensuring that the carbon removal units and the income coming from that can help in creating access to finance that transition. It might be good to mention here that Acorn as such is a platform that connects the farmers to the voluntary carbon market. We do not have a financing book ourselves, but we do have people in the team to try to help with the development of the business case and link to possible financiers to create access to the finance that might be needed to scale agroforestry projects, as we see that is very critical to scale. And one example is a loan that was provided by Rabo Foundation to those same farmers in Zambia.
Martin, can I interrupt you for a minute? Can you check your mic, because there's a lot of echo coming and disturbance coming at your end.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Let me see.
There's a lot of disturbance, and if everyone also please mute your mics, because there's a lot of disturbance coming while Martin is speaking. Just a minute. Okay, go ahead, Martin.
Is it better like this?
It is still coming, and I think it is the mic started when you started speaking. It was okay when Jelmer was speaking.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, try it out.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead. So as I said, we together with our Rabo Foundation provided a loan to finance the transition to agroforestry for a number of farmers in Zambia, in this case, whereby the future revenue of the carbon removal unit serves as a source of repayment. It's a long-term loan with a grace period in the time that the trees are growing, and where the repayment comes when the carbon removal units are being generated, which is expected from year 3 onwards or so. With a cash sweep mechanism. I'm happy to tell you a little bit more of those details. So this is one example of a standalone financing. As a team, we're trying to see how can we scale this as well. And Jelmer, if you can go to the next slide. We're looking to partners to see can we reach or create a long-term solution through a blended finance fund or an impact bond, possibly complemented with a TEA facility. And we're very happy to work with all kinds of partners, so feel free to reach out on that respect, but also on phase 2, where we're trying to work with different organizations to finance the transition at scale, because we expect that the loan sizes will increase over time. And also there, happy to work together with partners, so feel free to reach out on that. So how that would look like, there's different loan structures obviously possible, but one where we really focus on repaying the loan through the proceeds of the carbon removal units is illustrated here, whereby a financier provides a loan to a local partner who uses these funds to provide in-kind provisions to the farmers. In this case, it might be seedling samplings. The farmers plant the trees on their farm, supported by the local partner with technical assistance if required, and ensuring that an agroforestry system makes sense in the local context. The trees that are grown are measured through the Acorn platform. Carbon removal units that are being generated are sold to buyers looking to offset their emissions, and repayment is done through Acorn, who retains a 10% margin, and then the remainder is paid out to the local partner. This is one example. There's different examples possible, and we're happy to explore that with different organizations. As I said, in addition to the farmers, we also want to make sure that the business case or the proposition of Acorn makes sense to the local partners. And we believe that the proposition, as we have it now, provides a number of benefits to the local partners. first and foremost, creating a cost-efficient way to link farmers to the voluntary carbon market, making it a more viable business case as compared to the current the situation as it was before. We believe that with this, the relationship between the local partner and the farmers might be improved as additional services offered to the farmers through the payment for the carbon they sequester. This might also increase the success rate of implementing agroforestry systems. And we're offering an additional income stream to the local partners with the 10% of the carbon income in order to cover the Acorn-related costs at scale. And in the case we're talking about value chain players, we're also exploring the possibilities of using the Acorn services to include on-farm sequestration in Scope 3 reduction. But what is important for us there is to ensure that this makes sense from a farmer's perspective, so that we're looking at a compensation that is fair and makes sense for the farmers. Emma might touch upon this at a later stage as well. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Eline. Oh, sorry, one final question. Yeah, we're currently working in 10 countries, looking at existing agroforestry projects that have started in the past 5 years, whereby we are able to justify the additionality, as well as started new agroforestry projects with the intention to further scale them. And as such, we're active in Africa and Latin America at this point in time, and currently looking to scale to Asia as well. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Martin. So I'm sorry that I reversed the order in terms of Jelmer going first. Jelmer is the head of Acorn. I just want to introduce him, and Martin, as I introduced earlier as well. So without further ado, I'll go now to Eline, who is the head of certification at Acorn. Eline, the floor is yours. Please keep on asking your questions, and I would request panelists from Acorn to keep on responding in the chat. Please observe the questions. If there are clarification questions, we will do them, in the chat. But the substantive questions, we will take them in the Q&A at the end. So please keep on posing your questions. We have a good participation. We have 155 people on the line today, and I think it should be an interesting discussion. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you very much, and happy to be here all today.
So, yeah.
I see questions coming in, so that's very good to see. Yeah, what I want to tell you today about is the certification within Acorn and how we have organized this. So I'm happy to inform you that earlier this year we had our public consultation and the launch of the Acorn framework and the Acorn methodology. So what these two documents do is within the Acorn framework, we describe what our projects need to adhere to in order to get to a certain quality standard. And the methodology goes a bit more in depth on the carbon calculations and how do we then define the carbon removal units within Acorn. Well, when we started diving into how can we best certify Acorn as a program, we saw that there were many barriers out there for our concept, actually. There was a high cost in order to get certified. Which is, of course, a challenge when you work with smallholder farmers. But we also saw that there was limited methodologies and standards out there that really focused on agroforestry as a project intervention that guaranteed ex-post carbon credits. So we started having the discussion with multiple certifiers out there. By the concept of creating a standard on a program level. So that is how the Acorn framework came to its existence. And we work in collaboration with Plan Vivo. Plan Vivo is a certifier that has over 25 years of experience with working with smallholder farmers. So we saw a good fit there. Well, what does our framework now bring? I think there are a couple of elements. First of all, the project allows for a sampling strategy. So rather than having each individual project going through the certification process, we can now have that at a sample base. So only a number of projects within the Acorn program need to go through the entire process from A to C. Well, we also believe that this approach allows for much more scalability. And with having the focus on smallholder farmers and many smallholder farmers to get to scale, we saw the necessity to simplify the certification process much more. So those are like 3 S's that we hope to achieve with our framework. Maybe good to elaborate here a little bit is, well, who is then eligible for joining the Acorn program? For us, well, Martina already mentioned it, but local partners on the ground are for us a key stakeholder. And where do we look at when doing the evaluation of eligible local partners is whether they have the capacity and the experience for a longer time period, and whether they're actually to mobilize the necessary resources in order to make the transition to agroforestry with the farmers on the ground. Well, and if you then look specifically to the farmers themselves, I think it's already mentioned, but there needs to be a maximum of 10 hectares of land. There needs to be clear land tenure rights, and we do a deforestation check before projects are eligible. I only have a certain limited time, so let me go through the methodology also. So what do we describe within the methodology? I already said this methodology describes how we calculate our carbon credits. It starts by explaining what kind of criteria are out there for the projects to adhere to. And then it explains what kind of carbon pools are included. So it's a very common structure that you see more often in methodologies. But I think good to highlight is that we have 3 different adjustment factors. An adjustment factor for leakage, an adjustment factor for pre-project trees, and an adjustment factor for uncertainty. So very quickly, the video here on the right shows you a LiDAR image. So this is input that we use in order to determine how many trees are already on the project area before the start of the project intervention, so that we don't actually include trees that are non-additional in our calculations. Working with remote sensing technology and having ground truth, there is always a part of uncertainty in there, so we adjust for that as well. And then we have a very detailed leakage assessment, which you can find much more in methodology as well. One last thing I think is good to mention is that we monitor the above ground biomass, but we also take a certain value for the below ground biomass. And we do that by means of root-shoot ratios that are based on common practices and scientific papers. That is it from the certification part. I hope that was all clear, and otherwise please put your questions in the chat and then I'll be able to answer them in the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Aline. I think it's going well, and I think you're keeping time. And so I would now ask Mila, who is the head of remote sensing at Acorn. And we are very interested in the methodology, the digital methodology, remote sensing, how it allows you to estimate these things in a more effective way. And how do you collect evidence for that? So over to you, Mila.
Thank you very much for this. Very excited to be here. So welcome and really pleased to see so many people attending this session. It's really great. But let me move on to the technology and the technological part. So as already mentioned, Acorn has its own remote sensing team, and the responsibility of the remote sensing team range from data quality, also adjustment factor, contribution to the adjustment factor and the eligibility criteria, but also to the estimation of the biomass and the change in biomass, and then the conversion to the carbon removal units. So this is the part on which I will focus in the coming slides. I will first give a little bit of an overview and then go into detail on each of the steps, in a little bit more detail in each of the steps. So what, of course, in order to enable everything that was said until now, the only way forward is to really go for remote sensing. Why that is? This is the only cost-effective way. What we would like to do is reduce as much as possible the cost on operations, so that we can contribute to the farm, we can give more to the farmers based on on what we do. So what does that mean? So, well, in order to enable the use of remote sensing, of course, we need ground truth data. Ground truth data is something that is extremely important. And what that helps us do is we have limited number of measurements in the field that are then linked to the satellite data, and we build the so-called machine learning models or artificial intelligence models, or whatever you want to call them. And then those models are used for scalability. So with those, we can then monitor large amounts of large areas, and of course reach the millions of farmers that we would like to onboard. What does ground truth data collection mean? There is, well, we follow a strategy. The strategy is very well defined in the methodology that Elena just now introduced. What this is basically we use strata, which is based on ecoregions. Each ecoregion actually refers to type of forestry that is there. And for each ecoregion, we need a minimum of 100 plots that are then used for ground truth. What we do is we select the plot, then we take a subplot, which is a 1 hectare plot, and we measure each individual tree for its height, for its diameter, and also we record the tree species and the year of planting. This input, then we also use LiDAR data to actually correct this and to see whether this is necessary. If we can go one slide back, that would be really nice. Yes, thank you. What I wanted to mention here was that we then use the LiDAR technology to validate that data, and then this is built into the models. Something that is very important is that we actually don't do this alone. We work with a number of remote sensing partners, which are companies based in the Netherlands at the moment. And what we do with them is, firstly, we share the burden of the data generation. So what happens is they also receive the ground truth data that we have, and they build their own artificial intelligence models. What we do is we then validate those models, and we follow strict criteria to ensure that what they deliver is compliant with data integrity, and also their models are to the accuracy that we also expect. The role of the remote sensing team in Acorn is, firstly, to, of course, also have that capacity to develop the models and produce biomass calculations. In case one of our partners is not able to deliver, we would still be able to reach out the numbers that we are after. But also what we do is we experiment and we develop new methodologies, new methods, which we then share with our partners as well if we see that they can improve their models on their side as well. We very much support this type of collaboration. We are not competing in any way, and what we will aim to do is actually strengthen the sector as much as possible in this direction. If they do good, we do good, and we take pride also in that collaboration. So once this is done, we also we do, of course, the validation. So we are sure that they deliver, and this is an extensive process that we go over. So now going back to the next slide, I think I kind of explained it a little bit in detail, but this is how it looks. And of course, for certain areas, especially in Africa, we see that a lot of the plots are smaller than 1 hectare. So for this purpose, it's a little bit more tricky to do. But for ground truth data, this is 1 hectare is the minimum size. But of course, for the actual monitoring of the farms, we also go below that with a limit of 0.1 hectares. So moving on to the next. This is what I would like to talk about, the ecoregion and the ground truth map. So this is what how we know how many ground truth points we need. We use so-called ecoregions defined by the WWF. And what these ecoregions determine is the natural development of those forests. So we believe that because of the uniqueness of each ecoregion, this is a good strata that we can use to start for the ground truth data collection. We assess the extent of all projects that enter the Acorn program, and we see whether we need to, how many ecoregions we would need to then collect ground truth data from, so that we can ensure that the models cover all variation that is possible. Once we have that, we then align this with with Sentinel images. These are the satellites provided by the European Space Agency, and they have the best resolution for this activity, but still be freely available for commercial use. We link the ground truth data to those, and then of course we use Landsat data as a backup, which has a little bit coarser resolution, but again feels missing data if necessary. And of course the LiDAR data, which we already showed. And then moving on to the next, this is the LiDAR data again. So how do we handle this? This is one of the plots that we measure for ground truth data. As you can see, this gives us a very detailed description of the plot. And what you can do is you can extract the height and the distribution, the density of trees within the plot. When on the first image on the left, what you see is the difference in height. So the higher you go, the red color is the highest and the blue is the lowest. And then what we do with this is then we also do the so-called image segmentation, which is on the second on your right. And then what this means is that we can also verify the count of the trees that are in the plot. Why we do that is because this is a very extensive procedure, of course, in the field. So what you can imagine is that very often our ground truth data collectors are, it's likely that they miss trees or they measure the height wrongly. So we always check the validity of the ground truth data. Unfortunately, flying LiDAR everywhere is not possible. So we still rely heavily on the collection in the field, but this is the way, whenever possible, we do this verification to ensure that the models are built with the best data possible. So moving on, what the actual model implementation means. This is, we plot, of course, we have all the polygons of our farmers. We have the model already developed. The model built, as I mentioned, combination of ground truth and satellite data. What we do is we build the model, we apply it on an area, and using the polygons of all the polygons that outline, or the outlines of the plots, we extract the data from our continuous biomass area. Now, this biomass is measured at 2 timestamps. So this is at the year of joining Acorn and 1 year before you joined, the farmer joined the program. We call that 1 year baseline. And then what we do is we calculate the difference between the current moment and 1 year ago. And that we refer to change in biomass, or the so-called delta in biomass value, which then is converted into carbon removal units following the description listed in our methodology. And these carbon removal units are then used for the compensation of the farmer. I think I have one more slide on which I would like to show where our current projects are. So as Martina already highlighted, so we have ongoing projects in Latin America and Africa, for where we have all the farmer information already stored. So this is also available on our website, where you can actually see the integrity and the location of all the polygons that we have. Extremely extensive work with which we are very proud, and anybody working with this type of data is very much aware of the extensive work that goes into this. So compliments to all of our partners in the field who are really busy collecting this data and enabling the Acorn proposition to move forward. And with this, I would like to hand over to Emma to talk a little bit about the carbon market. And please do post any questions for the remote sensing technology to me in the chat.
Thank you, Mila. As the final person from Acorn in this presentation, my goal is really to show you a little bit of what we are doing and how it impacts the carbon market. So to start with, if you could move to the next slide, Jelmer. I think we all know this picture where it really shows that if we want to achieve the 1.5 degrees, we need to move not just to emission reduction, but include removals. And that is really where Acorn sees our position. So to start with, I think it's good to emphasize that our position is not that Acorn credits are the end-all be-all solution to the climate change problems we are dealing with now, but we see ourselves as part of the solution where reduction is also crucial. So what you see that where we talk about removal, we don't talk about emission reduction or avoidance, which are the classical credits that are common in the carbon market, but we really look at emission sequestration. So this is really taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and storing it in this case, biomass. This does cause the moral dilemma where it's often cheaper to buy offsets instead of to reduce your own emissions. And for that, we have a few mitigation steps in place because we do not want to contribute to an easy way out, or greenwashing, as some people call it. So if you could go to the next slide, Jelmer. We really look at the carbon market and its purpose as a tool to achieve an equilibrium. So we say emission reduction come first, and that doesn't come easy. So we see points where governments play a role, but also consumers can really push for more carbon neutral products. And there should be a lot more transparency on emissions before you can achieve this. At the same time, we see that the carbon market as it stands now is almost equipped, and I'm talking about the voluntary carbon market mainly here, almost equipped to be part of this equilibrium, this balance between emissions and removals. This does require more transparency in the credits that are sold, in the level of quality, and in often scenarios of market segmentation could help in this, achieving a difference between what I showed on the previous slide, where you said removals or avoidance are completely different credits because they use a different accounting system. Then there's also the distinction between nature-based and technology-based clean energy credits. So segmentation could really help. And then, of course, the market price needs to go up to achieve a preferred route of first reducing and then offsetting. And then last on this list of the integrity of the carbon removals is the ex-post focus, so the real-time focus of credits. I'm listing this list basically to show that what we are doing at Acorn is really trying to contribute to this next level of quality in the carbon market. So by making our framework and our methodology publicly available, showing what we do in fine detail, really being able to trace the carbon credits to the plot, ensuring transparency and payout to farmers, we are trying to level the playing field in the carbon market and really invite other players to do a similar thing to create more transparency and increase the quality. At the same time, what we are really trying to focus on is help companies to find a way to deal with their unavoidable emissions. And for that, we see a role of carbon removals as a final resort for everything that could not have been reduced. So that would, in the end, ideally create a global balance in emissions and removals from the atmosphere. But this is for in the far future. We just want to do our part in the near future by focusing on transparency, traceability, and quality. If you could go to the next slide, this is a bit of an example of what that could look like. So really showing both the emissions and the removals that a company achieves. And this is, of course, for illustrative purposes. But this is where we want to go with Acorn. And then on the next slide, Jelmer, is an example of what we do to make sure we only sell our credits to the companies that have done their utmost to prevent emissions and to really reduce their emissions before they come to Acorn to buy the carbon credits. So we need companies who want to buy our credits to have publicly stated their corporate pledges, either through, for example, the Science Based Targets Initiative, or by being very public in their audited all of the plants. So this is a bit of a controversial stance in the carbon market, and there are not many examples of carbon projects or carbon credit sellers who do this, but we think it's part of the way to achieve this equilibrium, to really focus first on doing it. So I'd like to summarize what everybody has said through this list of what we do as Acorn to achieve a higher quality in the carbon market. We focus on nature-based, so our credits do not just generate carbon credits, but they really restore nature. We focus on removal, so actually taking CO2 out of the air. Ex post, so in the year that you emit your CO2 is the same year that we take CO2 out of the air and store it in biomass. Then, of course, we are very transparent in our data-driven method. It is traceable. We are certified, independently verified. And then this creates to the level of integrity that we hope to see in the rest of the carbon market. And to finalize, the co-benefits, what we consider to be high quality, is at least 3 additional SDGs, like Jelmer showed them at the beginning of the presentation. And with that, I would like to share a call to action. We are looking to scale beyond what we are doing now. So I saw a few examples in the comments. I would highly invite you to contact us if you work on any project with smallholder farmers and agroforestry that is scalable and that could be interesting for Acorn. We are very happy to hear from you, and we want to thank you for your time and attention, and we hope to hear a lot of your great questions.
Thanks a lot, Emma, and very, very good that in 40 minutes you were able to, the whole team has been able to cover a whole range of issues. You've given us a look at the future also of what it will look like. And also I'm already seeing a lot of people showing interest in approaching you. So that's also the purpose of these webinars, is that you get access to a lot of new people, new contacts. But I think there are some good technical questions also coming in, which I will harvest at the end and cluster them and post them to you. Before I do that, I will now bring in our 4 discussants who are subject matter specialists on this topic, and they will also spend 5 minutes each in talking about what they're doing and also reacting to your presentation. So first in the list is Ademola Bramo. He's our coordinator of our Climate Smart Agriculture Program in Africa, and he leads number of our investments in this area. Ademola, over to you. 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pamesh. Sorry, can you all hear me? I just want to be sure that my mic is working.
Yes, Ademola, you are loud and clear.
Excellent. Now, in countries where deforestation and poor agricultural practices are a threat to livelihood and environmental sustainability, what we have found out is that carbon payments can serve as an incentive to halt destruction of forests, to promote the adoption of climate smart agriculture, and also to institutionalize sustainable forest management. And I'm going to use an example in Zambia as an example, as to buttress this point. Now, this slide that my colleague is showing is to enable us to conceptualize the complexities in agricultural carbon markets. That stage, that ecosystem can be complex, but this is a simplified version of what happens and the key players that are there. Now, back to the Komako project. This is a project that is a story of successful partnership between the World Bank, the government, as well as the private sector. Partnership in terms of sustainable landscape management. It's an evidence that climate mitigation and socioeconomic development, I saw a couple of SDGs in the presentation by Acorn, can be achieved through active participation of local communities. In the past, we used to believe that, well, to bring mitigation to the level that is desired, then forget about socioeconomic development and so on. No, these two need to be pursued concurrently. So for the Komako project in Zambia, what did we achieve? 19,000 smallholder farmers were brought in and enrolled in a carbon finance project for adopting climate smart agriculture. Secondly, RED Plus activities were implemented in more than 100,000 hectares of community forest. And the project promoted simple technologies and practices such as agroforestry, intercropping, conservation agriculture, crop rotation, as well as crop diversification. All of this enhanced forest conservation and also increased smallholders' crop yields and income. Now, the scale of emission that we achieved was equivalent to about taking 57,000 passengers vehicle off the road, close to 270,000 metric tons off the road in a full year, or by avoiding the burning of 290 million pounds of coal. Coal is a hot topic currently, but this project exemplified that through nature-based solutions, you can actually solve some of the problems that that inefficient energies can cause to the to our climate problems. Now, what are the major lessons from the Komako project? The first one is that access to market incentivizes the adoption of sustainable land management approaches that, like I mentioned. Then the use of satellite images and other innovative approaches contributed to buy-in for a wide array of stakeholders. But this also created an issue, the need to build technical capacity for the adoption of such approaches. I mean, a lot has been said since morning, but the truth about the matter is that you need a lot of technical capacity to be built for proper uptake of the technologies. Then the last one is that the use of carbon finance to support farmers during the initial period when trees are growing can be very, very instrumental to the adoption of the sustainable land management technologies themselves. For instance, agroforestry, which could require about 3 to 5 years before the trees begin to yield some economic returns. So these are very, very crucial as part of the efforts to promote the technologies, to promote carbon finance for the adoption of sustainable land management. And lastly, as part of the good news is that the pilot, Komako project eventually served as a pilot that we have now used, that has now succeeded an ongoing project. We could generate up to 200 million in carbon revenues for local communities. So I would like to hear more from Acorn, possibly offline, on how they could possibly be involved in these approaches. Thank you very much.
And I would request also the discussants to respond to the Acorn presentation as well, because I need your responses. And I would request the World Bank colleagues to also suggest how this collaboration between World Bank and Acorn could happen in a practical kind of way. So that would be also appreciated. So the next discussant is Rama Reddy, who is the senior environmental economist in the Middle East region. He's worked in the climate finance unit for a long time on methodologies and other aspects, as well as policy issues on carbon markets. So over to you, Rama, and please also talk about the applicability of this approach in our operations. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Parmesh, and thanks. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever in different time zones. My name is Rama Reddy. I'm senior environmental economist in Middle East and North Africa region, and I also worked on these programs for a significant period of time at the World Bank. So I would just continuing the discussion, I would also like to highlight one example where this all got initiated in 2014 when we first developed a smallholder agroforestry methodology under VCS. And probably several of you are aware of that's one of the earliest methodologies and projects in the space. Kenya Agriculture Carbon Project that was implemented by 60,000 farmers in 45,000 hectares in a very small, very small scale farmers implementing improved agricultural practices. And then that was the methodology in a way to demonstrate how in a low capacity and subsistence conditions, how these the climate mitigation and the adaptation programs could be advanced. So we have come significantly from that experience and advanced quite a bit and several over the last 10 years, 8 to 10 years, significant progress has been made. So using that context, I think we are progressing, learning and developing new methods and new approaches to overcome some of the constraints at the small farmer level. But also we need to keep this in a big picture in terms of what are we focusing on. It's a climate mitigation at the global level. And also farmer-centric approach, using farmer-centric approaches. So in some of the points which I would like to pose to Acorn team, I think they have reflected, probably also worth reflecting is that, in terms of in countries where these pilot projects are being implemented, in terms of links to the policy, we haven't heard in terms of, how this helps the governments in terms of improve or mainstream some of the create value chains that are that would advance in those regions. So that's one part. And then second is NDCs. Several countries have now NDCs. So I think when each of these initiatives are implemented and some countries have their agriculture and forestry in their target. So what does that mean when some companies are using them for offsetting purpose? This is an ongoing discussion that probably would resolve over time, but I guess the team probably would need to look at this aspect. And the third aspect which I would like to highlight is the time period. So from the slides, I see that it's a 15-year time period for the program. So one question or few questions that would come up, if the farmer exits before that time period, after the farmer repays the loan, so how is this, the issued credits are how they are treated? So one question that would come back is the permanence part of it. I heard somewhere that it's 20-year you consider, but how do you deal with permanence in an efficient way? Is there any buffer requirements that are out there at the program level that would address the risk? So that's another question. So in terms of the finance, especially the overall productivity of the system, so we see that there is a 40% gain in terms of the farmer income. And out of that, only 10% is the carbon revenue. Remaining 30% is the productivity of agricultural system. That I think the whole of the presentation is silent on that part. I think we need to highlight how carbon is a very tiny element. So, and of course, that would drive some of this innovation in terms of the data, but productivity, value addition, how the local economy, ecology, employment, what does that mean? Because the 10% of the carbon revenue would not, farmer is not interested in participating for that. That's hook for us for a policy. But I think that story needs to be much more amplified. What does that mean? And also there is not much information on the tree species and what kind of value addition that's involved. There's some, for example, if it is, are there commercial species versus subsistence species? And also, in the value chain, are there storage facilities? The small businesses improvements that would take place. So I think that development story is critical, and I think we need to bring that more. That's in fact is I would rate as a core of this, and carbon is less, and so I would urge the team to think on those lines. And then, in terms of the uncertainty, so one issue that when I looked I think there is still significant uncertainty. I think you say 30% uncertainty. Also, somewhere I say that 50%. So if it's such high levels of uncertainty, and then there are some adjustment factors. So in terms of the number of credits issued, so would there be significant discounting that applies? And then what does that mean for offsetting for a company that uses these credits? So something probably worth reflecting on this. And as I also indicated, the local ecology and economy. So like now, we haven't heard in terms of the biodiversity and our values and also whether it's exotics. I think these programs also, one needs to be a bit more careful in terms of introducing exotic species and also that's one of the challenges, especially when economy-driven decisions are made, because we are creating agroforestry systems for a longer period of time. So I don't know how those both ecology and economy trade-offs would be managed. That's something to reflect on. And also the loan repayment part. So in terms
I would request you to wind up in a minute because I think we have to bring in questions from the audience.
Okay, yeah, I'm just closing. So one last point is in terms of the agroforestry models and species selection. So do you do some consultations? How do you come out with the models that are most appropriate? So is there any scientific consultations or the policy consultations with the government? Because these are longer term decisions. Okay, stop here. Thank you for permission.
A lot of issues for the Acorn team to respond to. Please, I'm sure you are noting because they are not in the chat, so I can't remember all of them. So I'm sure you guys will respond to not all of them, but most important of them. I'll now introduce my colleague Bill Sutton, who is the Global Lead for Climate Smart Agriculture at the Agriculture and Food Global Practice. Has tremendous experience on leading these investments, was the coordinator of our Climate Smart and Sustainable Agriculture program in China, and also led number of operations in East Asia on this issue and currently leads our global work on this issue. And so Bill, over to you.
Thanks very much, Parmesh. Hello, everyone, and many thanks to Acorn for the interesting presentation. Just to provide some context, the latest IPCC assessments that have just come out in the last couple months further confirm what we've long known, which is that agriculture is particularly vulnerable to climate change, pushing millions more people into food insecurity. And at the same time, the agri-food system is part of the problem, contributing from 1/5 to 1/3 of total global greenhouse gas emissions, by some estimates, second only to the energy sector. And we at the World Bank believe that agriculture can and must also be part of the solution, not just adapting and reducing its own emissions, but also capturing and sequestering carbon emitted by other sectors as well. And we've been laying the groundwork for that by mainstreaming climate change in our own investment portfolio, including by identifying agriculture and food as one of the 5 key transitions in the new World Bank Group Climate Change Action Plan, and moreover, by increasing our financing for climate smart agriculture more than 7 times since the Paris Agreement was signed. But elsewhere, it's been estimated that globally, only 3% of climate finance is going to agriculture and only 1.7% goes to smallholder farmers. So I think that the challenges for all of us are to significantly accelerate and scale up support for climate smart, inclusive agriculture. And one of the things that we're doing at the World Bank going forward is to launch a global flagship on decarbonization of agriculture and recarbonization of landscapes that will lay out a roadmap for the optimal pathways to promote food system transformation through our own portfolio and support to our client countries. But the needs and opportunities are immense. We can't possibly do it all alone. So we invite our development partners as well as private sector investors to join us in this effort. And I think the ability described by Acorn to remotely measure carbon sequestered in trees and then sell it on the voluntary carbon market, it could be a big help, particularly if it can assist low-income smallholder farmers in developing countries with accessing climate finance. In addition, it would be great to see some data on the quantities of carbon and the CRUs generated from this approach so far. And also, the model seems to assume that the majority of the increased farmer income actually comes from increased food production rather than from carbon credits. So that's a pretty important assumption, and it would be good to see some actual data on the outcomes of that so far. I agree with the point that Acorn made that the voluntary carbon market should incentivize emissions reductions from agriculture in addition to sequestration. That would be a game changer, but so far it's really not happening. Moreover, it's been estimated that soils contain 4 times the amount of carbon stored in all living plants and animals, including trees. So in addition to afforestation, it would be ideal if we could incentivize farmers to invest more in soil health by providing climate finance for soil carbon. And that requires scalable, low-cost, accurate measurement, reporting, and verification, or MRV systems. That's something that we've been exploring at the World Bank, including through the development of a soil organic carbon MRV source book. But much more work is needed in this area, and we would welcome strong private sector engagement in that. Thank you.
A lot, Bill, for very, very clear remarks about World Bank's strategy, the new flagship report on decarbonization, and I think we will invite Acorn to present the case in that global flagship report with data and all. It would be really add to the substantive case in that decarbonization report. And also, Bill is also talking about engaging in the new area of soil carbon. So personally, we believe that soil carbon is a part of futuristic story, and that market could also be quite big eventually if we have developed good protocols for measurement. So now I have finally the final discussant, Joel Bronnen, who heads Solidaridad in Colombia and has been actively involved in working with Acorn as well. So Joel, over to you. Can you describe what you are doing and what is your impression about this approach?
Thank you, Parmesh, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone here in the webinar. Yes, I'm leading the operations in Colombia for Solidaridad. Solidaridad, for those who are not familiar with us, we're an organization that implements solutions for smallholder farmers in over 40 countries, together with different supply chain partners. For us, Acorn is a game changer in the way that it connects smallholders to carbon markets. And we have been working on this for years, also with other types of standards, but this one is the first one where we really have a business case, and we'll get back to that a bit later. We are very happy with the work that has been presented by the Rabobank team, by Jelmar, Martine, Eline, Emma, and Mila on this innovative scheme. But why we think this is innovative, and I think also this is based in the practice that we have so far in the last 2 years, working in different clusters in Colombia with coffee farmers that mainly have moved from sun-grown coffee to agroforestry models. Why is this innovative? Because first, it reduces verification costs, and that has always been a barrier for us to connect farmers. The second part is it enables individual onboarding, and so you do have a group, but it is on an individual basis, which I think is quite unique in this sense for smallholders. The third one is it provides high value for the carbon supplier. So what was mentioned already earlier by Martina, 80% goes back to the supplier, which is quite a high percentage if you look into the value and potential value that we can get out from carbon markets. And fourth, it complements the main business. of a farmer, which is farming in the end. I mean, it's not, they're not there only for carbon. It's their main crop there always stays there. So it gives them, let's say, an additional income. They give you a range about that. I think it's already mentioned in the presentation. We see, let's say, in between 15 to 20% extra. But in the end, if you look this as from a profit perspective, that can, make or break your farming there as well. So it's an interesting add-on. The role of Solidarity here, what we have seen so far is we've been mainly working in 4 pillars, which is measurement for Acorn, but also say in the wider footprinting of carbon. We're building capacity for the long-term embedding that also ensures delivery for the next 20 years. Technical assistance, so to ensure the progress on the ground and resolving operational issues individually with farmers, but also with partners. And the transactions, so it's onboarding of the farmers, but also assisting verification process and ensuring payment. So this year, we're approximately get to 10,000 farmers in different clusters. And we expect to grow to another 100,000 in the next 5 years in Latin America. And a bit on the, there was a question before already here on how much, what is the average tons you get per hectare? Well, in coffee, we're more or less around 5 tons per hectare, which you can get out, let's say, from the Acorn scheme, which is only tree-based carbon that's being sequestered. But there's also, in the experience so far on the ground, it's always about the proof in the pudding, right? So what I will say is a few learnings there. First of all, it's a patient process. But it has long-term benefits. We're talking here about 20 years, which is quite unique. You can guarantee an income for 20 years. But the payments only come after a year. If you really start from scratch, then it only comes after year 3. So you need to have intermediate activities in between. Secondly, the results can vary depending on the crop cycle. Because in some cases, the main crops also they oblige you also to do, for example, pruning, which also means that your biomass temporarily will reduce. So it's always about also the production cycle you have to adapt or taking into account the calculations. Third one is the mitigation of this is not the sole driver for farmers to go into these schemes. I mean, it's also about reducing climate risk. And trees, in that sense, are a nature-based insurance. So in that sense, I would not put it only around the carbon farming. It's a much wider model there. And the business case is not only there for carbon farming as such, because the inputs, what we put in and we can get out, it's positive. But it is a much wider business case, and overall it improves, let's say, the business case for smaller farmers for their crops, and it creates an additional economy for the involved communities. So you can think of inputs like trees, services, etc. So it is, let's say, not only the farm itself, but also it's important there that you have a community-based approach. It's highly scalable. I think that already was mentioned. But I see also a few, let's say, things on the horizon that might be important there to mention. First of all is potential overlap with insetting approaches of big companies. So what we already see is that some companies now really move fast into insetting. But where does the insetting goes and where does the offsetting goes? And in Acorn terms, how do you make the optimal deal, both for the companies, but also for the farmers? Why? To ensure the benefits, that the benefit reach the farmer, right? So in your long term, therefore it's important that, if you want to have a long-term participation of these farmers, the benefits in majority, they have to get to the farmer. So therefore I would like to echo there as well what already was mentioned by the earlier intervention of Mr. Sutton. Support to smallholder farmers is critical there. And that's something for the long term. So if we want to make this a success, then we need to have a long-term vision here, and I think we can do that with this groundbreaking initiative.
Thanks a lot, Joel, and you really answered some of the questions as well, which Acorn team, I will not put to Acorn team now. So I have now harvested some questions. I'm not going to take all the questions. We have an interesting mix of participants. Some people know more about this topic and they're asking you more questions about methodology and all the things, and I think you're answering them to the best of your ability. I'll take 2 or 3 fundamental questions. First is, what is the farmer business case? Does it work only for some crops like coffee, which are already cash crops and they have a flow there? And so this becomes an additional thing there. And then that makes it much easier to implement. In cases where you don't have profitability, is this going to work on those crops and cropping systems also there? So I think what is the applicability? See, my personal experience, I have implemented these approaches for last 15 years. They all go up to 50,000 farmers and they stop after that. Nothing goes above 50,000 because of various constraints, because we're trying to adopt a uniform approach. The farmer business case questions are there. What is the business case to farmers? Is it an additional business case? How much are we talking about farmer per hectare, per farmer? Which ecosystems is this going to likely to work? Is it universal, or is it going to be more applicable and scalable in certain ecological and commodity situations? So this is a question which is a very important question, because if we invest a lot, say the World Bank works with about 100 million smallholders globally in one way or the other through policy and direct interventions. So if we are going to recommend this initiative to the governments to spend out of the public investment, which is going to happen, which Rama was also saying, that if we are able to build a public investment case for doing some of the things which you are doing through private part of it, you could go to a higher scale by increasing incremental cost to that. So what is the business case to farmers? Is it applicable only in some agroecological and some commodity situations? Third is what could be the role of public institutions to help scale up this approach? Fourth, what my colleague Renato asked you, if World Bank is doing a smallholder program, how would you work with that program? What are the practical modalities of you working with $100 million World Bank investment? We have climate smart investments also coming in. And the other questions are raised by my colleagues Bill and Rama and Ademola, and Joel also raised some of the issues. So if you can respond to these 3-4 set of questions, it would be good, because we can only cover those questions in the remaining time. So who wants to go from your side? Jelmer, would you take the first cut, and you can bring in anyone from your team to
I'll
answer
take a first cut.
Sure.
And thanks a lot to all the discussions, the view from the World Bank, the experience, and also thanks a lot, Joel. So on the farmer business case, we have already proven that Acorn is agnostic. So Joel in Colombia is at the moment currently working with coffee farmers. In Ivory Coast, we're working together with cocoa farmers. In Zambia, we are working with subsistence farmers. And this business case is driven by the unique criteria of a farmer. It always should be a farmer-centric proposition that should be developed. So the species that are grown should be native species, should be suitable for the farmer to let them blossom. And therefore, yeah, we cannot put figures at once. But what we see on sequestration rates on average, for instance, is the 5 to 10 carbon removal units that are created on an hectare. So with a farmer earning on average like $500 to $1,000 per hectare, can now earn an additional $100 to $200 on the carbon. On itself, the agroforestry program always should be beneficial to a farmer. So sometimes it's protecting its yields, sometimes it's increasing the yields, and that should be a business case as well. What Acorn makes as a game changer is that there were never those investments in the agroforestry projects were often so hard. The tenors were very long because the trees only started producing fruits or protecting the yields after a couple of times. But now there are two important game changes. One is that the yearly payout of those carbon removal units create an incentive for the farmer to take care of the trees. So the operational risk that the agroforestry scheme will not be implemented is low. Secondly, there is an international capital flow from reputable corporates that make sure that this investment also is very likely to be paid back. So if a World Bank invests, then the funding is not, the repayment is not depending any longer on the food revenues and what the farmer does in between harvesting and before he pays back. No, there's an international capital flow that flows from Rabobank to the local partner. Thereby the loan can be repaid. and then a farmer is being repaid. Some other questions. So what can we do with this public funding of the World Bank? I think it could be, as Martina already mentioned, there is still the upfront need of financing. And that's where I think the collaboration with the World Bank could be of a huge contribution to implement this at scale. And still there is like, on average, like 400 to $1,000 sometimes to a lower extent, $250 per farmer needed. Some questions that are raised by the colleague of Rama. So yes, it's always linked to local agricultural policies. Yes, we take care of NDCs. We see some governments that we also speak that say, no, we also experience with different programs in the past, like RED Plus. Madagascar says, okay, we don't deal any longer with RED Plus. But other countries will say, okay, this is a great way to attract this climate finance, and this is a great way to support those farmers. So let's not include those farmers in the NDCs. Let's get this money directly to the farmers. One other question was on the buffer pool, the permanence. So after the carbon is being sequestered for the next 20 years, we will monitor whether there's a reversal. It can be a fire, it can be logging. And then the buffer pool, so farmers sequesters an additional 15% will be applied. Other questions, I think a very important topic raised by William Sutton is on the food production. And I think this is really also where we need to join forces. We need to make sure that those countries become self-sufficient, that they increase their food productivity, that they diversify their diets. We should accelerate this movement. As mentioned, it also addressed by the IPCC. And yes, there is huge potential by sequestering the carbon in the soils, and we are looking into ways how we also can monetize this for the farmers. Yet, as explained, we also want to do this at scale. And that's where we currently still see some difficulties with remotely assessing the sequestered carbon into the soils. So that's what we're currently looking into.
And anyone else from your team would like to come in? And they have looked at all the questions which people are asking. So can you take some of the methodological questions which are being asked and some of the strategy questions being asked, and anyone would like to respond? Otherwise, I'll pose another question to you. Yeah, please go ahead.
All right. What I read a lot of times is that people wonder about the benefits to the farmers. And I think it's good to emphasize that by selling ex-post credits, we really only sell credits during the growth phase of this agroforestry system. And I think it's good to emphasize that we really also see Acorn as a tool to help implement agroforestry as a long-term solution. So it's never the goal to sequester carbon as much as we can. It's really to make carbon as a tool to make the transition to a more regenerative, more healthy, a more nutrient diverse and income diverse system. And that is also inherent to the way we sell carbon credits. So there's a growth phase, and then there's a phase in which the ecosystem will be roughly in an equilibrium when it comes to carbon. And that is the durability phase, or permanence, so to say. So we need to ensure that the systems we implement, they have a right to existence even beyond the carbon income that these farmers receive. So that's one of the ways in which we hold ourselves accountable to make sure we don't plant as many trees as possible for the benefit of carbon sequestration and then neglect the farmer needs. We really do see this as the core of Acorn, and carbon credit as a way to finance.
A final question I would like to raise is that you talked about your scale aspiration. So what are the pathways to scale which you are looking at right now? How do you go from where you are to the number you are talking about? And second is, the World Bank also supports a number of farmer organizations, farmer cooperatives, producer companies all over the world. These are almost like 250,000 of these, which really cover millions of farmers right now. So is there an enterprise solution I heard about an individual farmer solution. Could there be an enterprise solution for carbon credit whereby these farmer organizations could take it in bulk and then they would do a lot of work with their members to provide services for these kinds of things? So these two things, the scale pathways, what you are looking at, and what is your pathway for working with number of farmer producer organizations to become green and to really build carbon as part of the products they offer to their members?
So perhaps one thing to note is that we will always, at this point in time, work through local organizations. So never have a direct model there. So in that sense, yes, we would love to work with producer organizations. In fact, one of the local partners that we've worked with in Tanzania was a farmer cooperative. And I think that that's a very suitable model to work through. And in general, what we consider to be a local partner is any organization that has strong presence on the ground and has the capacity to work with the local farmers to support them in that switch to agroforestry and collect the data to onboard them onto the Acorn platform. And that is very much the approach for scale as well. And we'd love to explore together with the World Bank to what extent the network of the World Bank can benefit from this proposition through the partners locally and the farmers that they work, because that is the only way that we can scale fast.
So there are tons of questions, and all the chat which is happening is part of the recording of this webinar. So you will also get the chat archives as part of the recording. So you will not miss out on the conversations and Q&A which is happening, because we are not verbally answering questions. So the virtual answering will be also part of it. I really feel that this has been an excellent conversation and excellent presentation by Acorn and the subsequent questions and all. So we started with 161, we still have 117. I always look at the mortality rate of our webinars, who is standing till the end. And the fact that this number is almost reaching 70% is testimony to the quality of your presentation and the interest which people have shown to this topic. And what we would do is to do a more deep dive follow-up conversation with you, with Bill's team, and also the country investment managers who are investing in these kinds of projects, so that we can discover a specific value proposition which will be more unique to the World Bank programs there. And then we can see if we can develop some collaboration on that and put some focus on that there. So there are issues about smallholder returns, there are issues about methodology, but these are kind of issues which you are resolving going forward. And it will be good to also look at some documented, kind of fully documented case of the benefits and all, as Bill was referring to, which we could use in our global reports also as a case for what can be done, because that will allow you to get even more traction if we had a more documented case of what is happening there. So I think we will collaborate with you in developing a knowledge and a learning product from your example also. And we also are now starting a guest blog series as a result of these webinars. So we will invite you to do a guest blog on this approach, because there is a lot of interest in this already. So we will revert back to you on that. I want to thank all the Acorn team, led by Jelmer, and everyone else for really spending this time with us. I want to thank all the discussants, my colleagues, Bill, Rama and Ademola, and also Joel for bringing in the real perspective from Solidarity side, who is really an interesting player in this space as well. And I want to thank all the participants for participating very actively and asking questions. Please don't stop the conversation. Continue to ask, get in touch with the Acorn team and with us also if you want to ask more questions about what World Bank is doing in this area. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night for all the colleagues globally. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, World Bank.